Welcome back to ImpactEd, colleagues. Every week we step out an aspect of the situational analysis and give you some advice and some steps and some resources to help through. Everyone's probably at that point now where they've got a handful of things going on, looking at data, looking at wellbeing, looking at attendance, whatever, and they're starting to get some ideas about a way forward. What's a good logical way of making sure that step doesn't jump to conclusions, that it's not just a lip service? How do we tie all that together, Steve?
James, today what we're going to look at is theory to action. Now, this is a great tool. I first saw it being used down at Murray Farm Public School with great principal down there, Joe. We've had a look at it, we've done a bit of research, and we've tweaked it to suit what will work for our context and come up with a very simple tool that will help the group really consolidate their thinking, communicate to key stakeholders, and certainly provide a strong change management tool. So we might cut over to the resource. So James, our very simple tool breaks it down into 5 components. The first section is if we, so we describe what we're going to do, then what will happen, finally the impact in terms of student learning and outcomes, the evidence-based research that we come from for doing it, and finally our evaluative rhythm, so how we're going to measure and monitor the performance. And the easiest way for us to use this is if we demonstrate a very simple one.
This is resonating with me, Steve, because people who've done the evaluative thinking training will understand this as a logic model.
And that's a very good description because it is a logic model. So for this one, we've got, if we implement formative assessment on a 5-weekly cycle and use the data to inform the next 5 weeks teaching and learning cycle, and also to identify specific student needs for intervention, then we expect to see an increase in the amount of purposeful teaching and learning time, which will lead to increased engagement and enhanced student outcomes. Now, we've pulled out 2 possible impact measures. So reduce the number of students below national minimum standard from something to something else by the end of 2022. And also to increase the number of students achieving in the top 2 bands of numeracy from something to something by the end of 2024. You'll notice, James, that we've chosen 2 different years, which is perfectly fine. They don't have to be aligned. In terms of evidence base, and we should highlight that this is an example, not an exemplar, we've grabbed a couple of very common ones. So Dylan Williams, embedding formative assessment. Selena Fisk, who we really like, her data analysis because it's in Australian schools. And finally, we've pulled out 2 key effect sizes out of Hattie's work around responses to intervention and also formative evaluation. In terms of our evaluative rhythm cycle, and if I just move us our little row, we could look at a term-based review of the impact of intervention on a student-by-student basis. We could look at a semester evaluation of progress by the cohort, and we could triangulate that with our yearly NAPLAN, looking at both national minimum standards and also the top 2 bands.
All right, so stepping this through, this school has decided it's got some issues in numeracy. It's thinking from its examination of that formative assessment is the way to go. Rather than just plug in formative assessment and wait around for a result, they've stepped through, they're going, well, if we do formative assessment, then we should expect to see these things. So we've got half a chance halfway through the year to understand whether the formative assessment angle is on track.
And I think the then section gives a milestone. I've heard you describe, we set a target, and if we do this, and a miracle happens in the middle.
Yeah, that important miracle in the middle
yes. Well,
steps out what you're really expecting to see happen.
And if a principal's introducing that to the ACG, to the staff, to the P&C, it's really simple process of showing this is why we want to change, this is how we want to change, this is what we expect to happen, and we expect that because of the evidence.
Yeah, and the evidence is saying this is the way to address that problem. And really handy tool when you're going to your P&C or your ACG and saying, why did we choose that particular approach? Good, okay.
So James, if we go back, we'll pull the blank tool up.
Oh.
Let's have a go at just constructing one you'll remember from our attendance when looking into every child known, valued and cared for,
Yep.
one of the things we found was that students weren't coming to school on rainy days.
Yep.
So our theory of action could be, if we open the school hall on rainy days, play music clips and serve hot chocolates, then
we're expecting those kids who were previously reluctant to come to have a reason to come, and so they would.
Yep, so the impact, firstly, for the kids who are there anyway, less likely to get colds and be sick. We've got more kids more of the time, so we should expect to see our academic indicators go up. The interesting one for me is the evidence-based research for this.
No one wrote a paper on that as far as I'm aware.
No, but when we were going through and we suggested looking at a QDAI, so why are kids more likely to be away when it rains, and we conducted focus groups and we got the feedback, that would be our evidence-based research. James, how would you evaluate it?
Well, you could look at it purely quantitatively with your attendance figures, or you could do the same QDAI thing or do a focus group, or check in with the kids. You don't normally come on a rainy day. Why? What's the attraction? So, yeah.
So, James, a really simple tool. Mm-hmm. The first of our how-tos and our how-to videos we're going to try and make no more than 10 minutes. Really quite powerful tools, but we want to present them in a really simple way for schools to use. And that brings us to the end of this session.
Okay, so we'll be looking at what next?
Good question. What next? I think we are looking at the wellbeing framework.
And some focus groups.
We've got a lot going on.
We do. All right.
Well, that's all, folks.
Live long and prosper.